Shalom. I'll give the glory praises to Yahweh, Hashem, Yahweh Shah, Bashar, Hakudash, abundance to the elders, apostle, great millstone, help me, the truth, and sincerity, salutations to the hopeful that this spiritual focus of the earth. Another lesson titled Bretton Woods Agreement in the Institution is. No, this is going to be a title, another lesson titled The Bretton Woods Agreement, 1944. All right. And I'm just going to go into, how this basically kind of kind of made it made the Babylon the Great powerful, right? It made the U.S. powerful. Okay, I'm going to go into right, but through this, it made the U.S. powerful. Okay, it made ultimately Esau powerful. Okay, it made the U.S. dollar a hegemony. Okay. And what I mean when I say it made the U.S. powerful, I mean, when someone is powerful, that means that they are controlled. When a nation is powerful, that means they have power over other nations, whether that's a financial hegemony or a military hegemony. Okay. And this Bretton Woods Agreement was one of the action that made the U.S. powerful, okay, through the financial hegemony ultimately, okay. But it didn't stop here, okay. So the Bretton Woods Agreement, an agreement under which gold was the basis for the U.S. dollar and other currencies were pegged to the U.S. dollar's value, meaning what? If you wanted to trade, okay, you had to trade in the U.S. currency. If a country for India, if a currency of India, or a currency of China, or Japan, or Russia wanted to trade like oil, or just wanted to trade, they had to do it in the U.S. currency. All right. And I'm gonna get that meaning here. So I just took some notes. So it was the Bretton Woods Agreement was a new global economic order after World War II, making the U.S. dollar the world's reserve currency. All international trade required dollars, as I was going to. Nations had to hold dollar reserves. The U.S. controlled how many dollars exist, because the U.S. could print dollars, right? And then when that goes, actually that goes, and that ultimately goes into the Nixon shock, which I'm going to go into as well. Pegging other currencies to the dollar, pegging the dollar to gold. Gold was stored and guarded by the U.S. dollar. Okay. All right, and it led to the creation of the IMF and the World Banking for which the IMF stands for the International Monetary Fund, and um, the World Bank. Okay, okay. Now, so the point is the pegging, right? The pegging. I want to go into the word pegging, meaning fixing the value of one currency to another instead of letting it freely rise or fall. Okay, it goes into an example. Um, so I'm going to go into right. What was the Bretton Woods Agreement and system? The Bretton Woods Agreement was negotiated in July 1944 by delegates from 44 countries at the United Nations Monetary and Financial Conference held in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. Under the Bretton Woods system, gold was the basis for the US dollar, and other currencies were pegged to the US dollar's value. The Bretton Woods system effectively came to an end in the early 1970s, where President Richard Nixon announced that the U.S. would no longer exchange gold for U.S. currency. Okay, um, I'm going to read this third takeaway because I read the other two, but I already mentioned. But the third takeaway says the Bretton Woods system collapsed in the 1970s, but had a lasting influence on international currency exchange and trade through the development of the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. So understanding the Bretton Woods Agreement system, approximately 730 delegates representing 44 countries met in Bretton Woods in July 1944 with the principal goal of creating an efficient foreign exchange system, preventing competitive devaluation of currencies, and promoting international economic growth. All right. As the conference took place over just 3 weeks, to the primary designer of Bretton Woods system were the famous British economist John Maynard Keynes and chief international economist of the U.S. Treasury Department Harry um, Dexter White, right, which are two, um, I believe, are just two Edomites, okay, two bankers, two elites, basically. You can pause if you would want to read some of this. You can pause to read it. I just want to hit the main points. All the countries in the Bretton Woods system agreed to a fixed peg against the U.S. dollar with divergent on the 1% allowed. Countries are required to monitor and maintain their currency pegs, which they achieve primarily by using their currency to buy or sell US dollars as needed. The Bretton Woods system therefore minimized international currency exchange rate um, volatility, volatility, which helped international trade relations. More stability in foreign currency exchange was also a factor in the successful support of loans and grants internationally from the World Bank. All right. So basically, Esau had control over, you know, nation currency, basically. All right. Ultimately, you know, simple as Esau had control over the nation currency, right? He could, if a nation, like for example, if a nation in Africa, right, needed help, you know, development wise, they had to go to Esau. Okay, so Esau, which goes back to what Esau, he was a loner, right? He was a loner, and the nation was the borrowers. Okay, so the purpose of the International Monetary Fund, which I was going to write, the purpose of the International Monetary Fund was to monitor exchange rates and identify nations that needed global monetary support. The World Bank initially called the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, okay, IBRD, was established to manage funds available for providing assistance to countries that have been physically and financially devastated by World War II. Today, the IMF has 190 member countries and still continues to support global monetary corporations. So, if you want to, you know, if you needed support, okay, if your country, if you these why we say these different countries that really promotes the U.S. agenda, okay, you know these countries these countries these countries is why the scripture said, you know, the nations had drunken of the wine of, you know, basically the nations had drunken of the wine of the whore. Okay, Babylon the Great, right? The U.S. Babylon the Great. By what? By taking by in order for you to get down, in order for you to get any support financially, you have to get down with the whore. Okay, and the nation got down with the whore. Okay, ones not did, all of them did, right? And this all we believe that these different nations that promote the whore agenda, right? We believe that they are just puppet. The rulers, the leaders promote the whore agenda. We just believe they're puppet leaders set up. Okay, you know. That's why the you know Esau, he can go to the African nation like Kenya, right, and you know have them, you know, promote, you know, LGBT, you know, the happy agendas, right, laws, because what the different, you know, countries, they're getting in Africa, they're getting financial assistance from Esau. Okay, and if they refuse this, guess what? Esau, he can take he can remove them from that lifeline, right? That financial assistance, that monetary support. In tandem, the World Bank helps to promote these efforts through its loans and grants to governments. All right, before I get into the claps, I just want to bring out some more um, stuff I've written down. Right, so just more examples of um, says the U.S. dollar was pegged to gold. $35 equals 1 ounce of gold. Foreign governments could exchange dollars for gold. Not regular people. Other countries peg their currencies to the U.S. dollar. For example, British pound equals one fifth equal fifth rate to the dollar. French franc equals fifth rate to the dollar. So the IMF system centered the U.S. dollar backed by gold as the anchor of global trade. So the reason why, and going to the collapse, it says the IMF controls nations through loans. So the IMF controls nations through loans. So they're going back to the control, right? The control, and this is why the switch says how this, how Esau made the Isaiah going to Isaiah. When we take the devil out of power, the nation gonna say, it was this man that made the earth tremble. Okay, basically, you know, it's like so I'm gonna get it because there's so many things going to my mind. I'm trying to organize it so it can come out clear. The IMF controls nation through loans. The World Bank controls infrastructure and development. Okay, debt replaces change. So this goes into the control of Esau. Okay, Esau control over the nations. Okay, the devil. Okay, is ultimately the leech. All right. So it collapsed. Well, so it was operation from the 1944 to 1973. Okay, and it collapsed 1973, which after that you got the Nizza shock. Okay, which I'm going to go into in another lesson. But it says $2 million were printed. So the reason for a collapse was $2 million were printed because what um you know the currencies you know were trading in the U.S. dollar, right? The U.S. no longer had enough gold, right? All right. So the U.S. no longer had enough gold. Nations demanded gold, so the system collapsed in 1971, right? Because the U.S. dollar was backed by gold. All right. So it says, is the Bretton Woods Agreement still in effect? So the Bretton Woods system, which required a currency pegged to the U.S. dollar and linked the value of the dollar to gold, is no longer in effect. In the 1950s, the dollar has struggled within the system set up under the Bretton Woods Agreement. In 1971, President Nixon suspended its convertibility into gold. Today, currencies float against each other rather than being kept at firm pegs. Okay. What's the difference between the gold standard and Bretton Woods system? So the gold standard refers to any monetary system in which the value of currency is linked to gold. Currently, there are no countries that use the gold standard. what backs the U.S. dollar? Previously, the U.S. dollar was backed by gold. Today, the U.S. dollar isn't backed by anything other than the U.S. government's ability to generate revenue, meaning through like cutting down trees and printing, dollars, okay, printing paper. All right. So I'm going to bring out some precepts. This is Daniel the second chapter, verse 40. Okay, this is going into the dream, right? That I believe it was Nebuchadnezzar, right? Nebuchadnezzar had. All right. So this is Daniel's second chapter. All right, this is going to the dream that King Nebuchadnezzar had. Daniel second, Daniel second chapter, verse 40 reads. All right, this is going to the Roman. Okay. In the fourth kingdom should be strong as iron, for as much as iron breaketh in pieces and subdues all things, and as iron that breaketh all these shall it break in pieces and bruise. Okay, and that going to the strength, military strength of the Roman Empire. Okay, all right, the military strength of a nation. Okay, and remember, Babylon, the great. Okay, I also know the USA. It is the incarnation. Okay, of the Roman Empire, right? You can, we always say this, compare Rome, search up in Google, USA, comparison of Rome, right? You're gonna see a lot of similarities from its infrastructures, the White House, the columns, right? The government buildings, okay, even right. So um, they even got Archetytus, right? Which they have that built somewhere in Atlanta. Okay, the Archetytus, which some symbol is a it's symbolic because it represents the taking of the Lord chosen people. Okay, the robbing of the jewels. Okay, of the Lord. Okay, and capturing the nation, right? And that basically what it represents. Okay. Archetypes, but you can go if you want to go more. Want more detail, you can look it up, right? But the point is how America is the incarnation of Rome. Okay, it is of the beast. Okay, and ultimately Rome broke all the nation before it. Okay, you know the Greek. All right, all the nation. Which nation? The Babylon, the first kingdom. Okay, so it broke the Rome broke Mede, Persia, and Greece. Okay, and whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron. Okay, so you had the feet and toes, part clay, part clay and part iron. Okay, so that go into clay. We know is weak. Clay is soft. It's weak. Okay, iron is hard and strong. Okay, the kingdom should be divided. All right, so the kingdom should be divided. All right, but there should be in it of the strength of iron, of the iron. For as much as thou sawest the iron mixed with merry clay. All right. Okay. Which goes back to which go into the military. All right. And as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdom should be partly strong and partly broken. All right, and this would basically mean the kingdom should be partly strong and partly broken. And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with merry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of man, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. That these so and it says that these mixture of iron clay also show that these kingdoms would try to strengthen themselves by forming alliance with each other through intermarriage, but they would not hold together. Just iron and clay do not mix. So this ultimately, we say this represent the clay represent the, you know, it represent a financial state, right? You know, represent the financial state. Okay, you know, and we know that America, U.S., you know, is in debt. Okay, you know, I haven't looked at that clock, but I know it's in trillions of dollars. You know, 40, 50 trillions of dollars, right? And also represent, you know, the Civil War as well. You know, that happens. Okay, making it partly broken, right? You know, a kingdom that's partly strong, partly broken. You know, that kingdom's not gonna last long. All right, we know that the U.S. is not gonna it's not gonna last long. Okay, Kingdom of America is not gonna last long. The kingdom of Esau ultimately is not gonna last long. Okay, you know, because all these different countries are in debt. Okay, all these different countries of Esau, whether it's German, France, Britain, Spanish, American. Okay, it's all partly they're all partly broken and partly strong. Okay, so I'm getting there. Habakkuk. Habakkuk 2. This is Habakkuk 2 and 6 reads, should not all these take up a parable against him, and a taunting proverb against him, and say, woe to him that increases that which is not his? Okay. How long? And to him that laid it himself thick clay. Right? Now, thick clay, which goes back into what? You know, goes back to the Daniel second chapter, right? Which go back to a bot yacht, right? Which means weight of pledges, heavy debts. Okay, heavy debt. Okay, so that clay goes back to Daniel second chapter where it speaks about, you know, the clay and the iron, right? Partly clay, partly broken, right? Which go back to the financial state. Okay, of that of the Roman, of ultimately the Roman, right? All right. Which ultimately goes back to the incarnation. So the same way how the Roman fell, they're gonna be the same way the US is gonna fall, right? The US is gonna fall through I should think I wrote it down. Um One way the US is gonna fall is through let me see. I wrote it down somewhere. Um the which goes, you know, the dollar chop, right? It says, I forgot to mention this. So the dollar chop, which goes back to how this basically you know, I'm going to read that it was like showing up to a casino where you're the only person allowed to print your own chips in the bathroom, right? So, you know, which goes back to the this why this crucial why one of the reasons why the system failed was because the U.S. was printing too much money, right? You know, but here, what threatened U.S. superpower was going to be a lesson I was going to do, but one of them is debt spiral. Okay, not be able to control the debt. You're not be able to pay back your debt. Okay, all right. The one of is another one. Well, all three is weaponizing the dollar, which goes back to using the dollar to control nations. Okay, and do that, the nations is why you have Brits, right? The nations realizing that if they wanted to survive, if they wanted to be a sovereign nation, they have to, come up with their own economic systems, basically, right? Which they were the way you got Brits. Okay, the empire within internal polarization, right? Which goes back into civil war. Okay, you know, civil war. Okay, that always leads to a collapse of a nation, right? When your people are not in one accord, when your people are not in one agreement, okay, and when your people want to fight against the government, right? You know, that's not a country that is looking to stay around for a long time, right? So goes back to what partly broken, partly strong. This is the broken part. Debt power, weaponizing the dollar, so using your financial as a hegemony to control these nations, and you know, civil war with your own country, right? Partly strong goes back to its military hegemony. Okay, you know, being able to go into other nations and wage war. Okay, start proxy wars or get involved in proxy war and wage war on other nations, and be able to use your military as a fear tactic to have the nation be subject unto you. Okay, so I'm gonna go back to the scriptures. Okay, um, and I'm gonna close it out here in Job 9:24. My favorite precept says, "The earth is given to the hand of the wicked; he covers the faces of the judges thereof, if not wherein he is." Okay, so this is a prime example, right? The IMF and the in the IBRD, right? The International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, right? Are some symbolism of Esau, or symbolic of Esau. The the earth is given to the hand of Esau. Okay, I mean, what the power, right? You know, the control, right, of this earth, and those, ultimately these nations, right, are given to the hand of the wicked, right? The top bankers of the weak, mainly, and he covers the face of the judges. Again, goes back to the Israelites. Right, the Israelites are the judges, right? And that goes back to whitewashing, right? Him painting his pictures, right, his image over the true biblical Israelites, making them look white. And we know that they're dark brown skinned people. Okay. All right. So I'm gonna close here. The next lesson is gonna be on the Nixon shock, and then how the picture dollar averted the collapse. Okay, of the U.S. dollar. Right. Yeah. Just going to the U.S. superpower. Right. And but we know that this it's been okay. Is through the Lord. Ultimately, this is why the scripture speaks about how he should. This is why the scripture says that Esau he should be loose for a little season. Okay, because this start. the downfall of um this this wicked kingdom started was um ultimately started with the collapse of the you know the world banking system. Okay, the winning what it sounds like the winning agreement, right? You know, because now you're using fake cash, all right, fake money that's not backed by anything. Okay, you know, to control the world. All right, so ultimately, we know the end of the word. We ultimately know the end of the world started with the coming of Yahweh Shai. Okay, his return, the coming, the first coming of Yahweh Shai, right? But right now we're living at we're in the days of the last, right? The day of the party claim, party iron, okay, kingdom, right? So I'm close here. I can undergo praises to Yahweh, by Hashem, Yahweh Shah, by Hashem, Kakadash, and that's how I'm saying.